thank you very much, Madge, for inviting me and allowing me to speak. First, what I want to say that it's quite unfortunate for someone to insinuate that Jimmy Wanjigi can organize whatever has happened to him. I'm his lawyer, and we're in court. I saw his family being attacked. I witnessed Maina being attacked by more than 10 police officers who are fully armed. Wamboi was slapped in the house. The wife was slapped in the house, pinned on the floor. I mean, if somebody will insinuate that all those acts of attacks, I spent 2 days in that home. My car was robbed. My wallet that had my debit cards, my money, US dollars 3,000, 5,000 Kenya shillings in the car armrest, my LSK card, they were taken by the police. I mean, we should not try to allow diversionary tactics when an injustice is being meted out on an individual. You don't have to like Jimmy Wanjigi, but at least give him his due respect and his fundamental rights. The second thing I want to say is this, and also before I conclude that, if Jimmy Wanjigi is capable of staging all of this, and David Ndii saying what he says, nothing will have stopped them from arresting even all those officers. Someone who can stage an attack on his own home, where at one given time there were more than 500 police officers from different contingents, from the ATPU to administration police to regular police to DCI to NIS. And ultimately, there was even a presidential jammer, that brown Prado, that is normally part of the advance team for the president, that disconnects all communications. At some point, when we were trying to drive out of the compound, all our car keys were not turning on. I didn't even know that that is possible with a jammer. They had disconnected all electronic transmissions from cars that use electronic keys. So, I mean, it's actually unbelievable that someone will think Jimmy will organize all of that or have the capacity to organize that kind of atrocity against himself, his family, his friends, and his own lawyer. And today, even as we speak, 4 members of Bunge la Mwananchi Jacaranda have been held in police custody to date. They've gotten custodial orders against them, and they're trying to charge them for the fabricated offenses. It will take an extreme genius to organize and coordinate with all those agencies that now it's reduced to David Ndii saying that he's organized all of this. But fundamentally, the most important thing I wanted to say is this. Whatever Jimmy has spoken about, he didn't start speaking about it last week or this week. When Uhuru Kenyatta was still president in the month of July before the elections, Jimmy Wanjigi presented his own forensic audit of the national debt. And he presented it in a paid up advert that was aired on NTV, detailing what, in his view, were debts which were taken in a manner that did not comply with the laws of Kenya. At the time, people dismissed whatever he was saying. Some say that maybe it's just a disgruntled candidate who has been blocked from participating in the election. But he was saying this is the problem we are going to face. At that time, he was saying you are spending 60% of your revenue to debt finance. Now we are almost at 80% of your tax revenue going to debt finance. And he was saying this is going to be a problem way in the future. And from that July, before the election of 2022, to date,
I cannot hear you. Can anyone else hear him?
No.
Yeah, I think we lost him. Willis, we lost you. Okay, let me text him that we cannot hear him. As we wait for him to come back, I think, wait. Mukuru, are you able to speak? Because if you're not able to speak, then I'll remove you from the panel and bring on somebody else because you've been on the panel the whole time. Mukuru, then Fred Matiangi, are you able to speak? Because otherwise we free those 2 mics as we wait for Willis to continue. Okay, Willis, kindly proceed if you can. You can now speak because we couldn't hear you. Okay, let me remove this from the speaker. Otherwise, Mzalendo, take a go as we wait for him. Okay.
He's done his math.
Thank you so much,
Hold on.
Maj. Am I
Yeah,
audible?
hold on, Mzalendo. Willis, we were not hearing you the last 1 minute or 30
Okay,
seconds.
sorry.
So kindly
Let me
proceed.
just repeat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what Jimmy has done, he's gone back to our debt books and he's looked at Section 15 of the PFM Act. You only take debt for project finance if you are doing a development project. The only time the law allows you to borrow a debt for recurrent expenditure is only a pegged percentage of not more than 5% of the previous year's audited accounts, which, if you look at the math, it can only be around 100 billion Kenya shillings. Now, Jimmy has looked at our debt in the last. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can
Okay,
hear
I
you.
can
Yeah.
continue. If you look at our debt portfolio in the last 13 years, Jimmy has said, look at all the debts that were taken. What project did they finance? And where did Parliament approve for that debt to be taken? And that is what Jimmy says is what is called odious debt. That where you find a debt, and for example, is picked on domestic debt. If you pick on domestic debt, these banks borrowing, lending money to government, which project are they financing with these bills and bonds? Where is the parliamentary approval for that particular borrowing to be taken? And he says it's not there. If that be the case, then the debt that has been taken through bills and bonds is odious. It's illegal debt. And why are they doing it? I mean, those are questions that people can deal with without trying to distract Kenyans to start discussing the character of Jimmy Wanjigi, the messenger. He simply posed the issue. Let whoever has alternative facts bring them forward and say, we've taken this much domestic debt. This is where Parliament anchored or approved that debt to be taken. This is the project which that debt financed. If that does not exist, then all of us will agree that the bulk of our domestic debt, in fact, all of it in the last 5 years or so, even more, has been odious. It has been illegally taken. And you ask, why are they taking it illegally? And if you agree, if you notice, debt is taxed in advance. Because the debt you took this year will be paid with the tax collection of next year, the year after. So why are they taking debt without following the laid down procedures? Is it convenience? Is it peradventure? Is it that somebody wants to steal the tax in advance by taking this debt in the manner that does not comply with our constitution? He has done what we call a balanced uh, balance, uh, primary balance of our revenues vis-a-vis expenditures in the last 13 years, removing what we'll call as payments for debt finance. And he says if you take all the revenue that the Kenyan people collected and declared by KRA and posted in the Kenya Gazette by the Treasury, we collected in that period 13.3 trillion on revenue. Then he has looked at all the expenditures minus debt. What in our books we spent this money on. Our entire expenditure minus debt was 14.6 trillion. And taking a debt is normally meant to plug in the deficit. And Jimmy says, if all your money that you collected was 13.3 trillion, all your expenditures minus debt was 14.6 trillion, your deficit was 1.3 trillion. Anybody can do that math. And the documents that he's using to calculate these figures are publicly available. They are documents published by the Central Bank, National Treasury, KRA. He says your deficit was 1.3 trillion. So in that period of 10 years, if you wanted to borrow money, because debt is meant to plug a deficit, what is missing? It was only a deficit of 1.3 trillion, but we took 7.7 trillion. Now, I believe that is something any Kenyan can do the math and ask the question, why did we borrow 7.7 trillion when the deficit was only 1.3 trillion? We can do that without necessarily focusing on the personality of Jimmy Wanjigi and trying to attack him. Anybody who wants to start discussing the personality to distract you and to throw mud at Jimmy Wanjigi, do not fly. That is not our problem. Jimmy Wanjigi is not our problem. Our problem is debt and the people who are perpetuating these illegal debts. Let's ask them to give answers. If they took debt to spend on recurrent expenditure, let them come and say. Then, us as a people, we ask them, why did you spend our money on recurrent expenditure when our laws told you cannot do it? What informed that decision? And this is important because, especially if you take on the domestic debt pockets, government is borrowing from the domestic market. At some point, it was even 18%. It has been oscillating between 15 to 18%. When government is borrowing from the domestic market at 18 to 16, 15 to 18%, it crowds out you and I, the private sector, from accessing capital. And yet, it is our own taxpayers' money that will be used to pay that interest. And it is our deposit in the banks that is lent to our government. So why was government going through this? And even to make it, even some of our money that is collected through government agencies that is banked in the same banks, they use it to lend it to the same government. So you find money in government accounts held in the banks is lent to government at exorbitant interest rates, and then they come back to the taxpayer to collect more taxes to pay that interest rate on the money which belonged to government in government accounts that was lent to the same government. I mean, these are questions that can be asked without trying to distract people from the messenger who is opening the eyes of the people of Kenya. Thank you very much, Maj. Yes,
Yes,
sorry.
let me chime in. Let me give you a question there. I mean, Jimmy Wanjigi just also on national TV said that he was approached by both Ruto and Uhuru for help. And by that, he, acknowledged, or he let us know, the strengths that those both two presidents saw in him. And he's also friends with Raila. So my statement previously, before probably you joined, is that we need not forget that he has some instruments of power. And I like the way he actually openly said, because this is something most Kenyans do not want to hear, with being governed by the gun and by the money. So as such, even though he's your client, which I really respect, I just want to say that we cannot look away from the fact that he is indeed influential. But we do not want to, because where you're right is where the point that somebody cited what Dee was sharing. So that I want to also say that this is a league that they play. These are friends out there. So if they say things, they know the things why they're saying it. So in those statements, they can know, the genesis and everything. So those we don't want to, to malign people also in this space. So at that point, I agree with you. The point where we are not probably in the same line is where I see Jimmy as somebody who's very influential. I see him as somebody who has Uhuru in his pocket, Ruto in his pocket, and Raila in his pocket. That's my subjective opinion. Is that good or bad? Can be good, can be bad. But as we proceed now, what are the solutions?
Can I respond to that just
Yes,
for
please.
2 minutes?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy has never shied away or failed to publicly disclose his associations with Uhuru, with Ruto, with Raila. And he's given several public interviews on that relationship. But the fact that you have, at one point or another, been associated with someone or you've been allies does not mean that now you carry their burdens, that you are forever indebted to them, or every ill they do, you must cheerlead. What makes a relationship or a country great is when, even within the friendship or the association, people can disagree on ideas. And if you believe that what they are doing is wrong, is not for the public, is not in the interest of the nation, or does not believe in what they are doing in terms of principles, you walk away. So Jimmy Wanjigi principally disagreed with Uhuru Kenyatta on the SGR project, not as a tenderpreneur trying to ask for the project for himself, but on the cost. He said SGR should be a PPP, no government money, private sector bring the money and put up the line, upgrade the existing line to be a standard gauge railway. Uhuru's people seem to believe that they should be spending government money to put up a railway from Mombasa to Nairobi at 350 billion Kenya shillings. The plan that Jimmy had prepared was an SGR from Mombasa to Malaba at the cost of 55 billion Kenya shillings. Yet these guys want to, and that is not government money, private sector money. All government was doing was allowing access to the land. But the private sector was putting their money to build that SGR. Uhuru Kenyatta thought it was okay to spend 350 billion from Mombasa to Nairobi, not even Malaba. 350 billion. And he said, no, this is something that ultimately is going to cost this country. And he walked away. So some people try to insinuate he was in the SGR contract tender. He was not. And he made it clear. In fact, at one point, Uhuru called his entire cabinet standing outside the steps of State House, where they called what they were, the person they were calling the business cartel, who is anti-development, trying to stop a project that is going to build this country. They took ownership of their project and they did it. Now, if the easier way out for Jimmy would have been to say, since this money is going to come from government, now we are not going to spend private money. He could have easily said, okay, fine, let me get in and continue with it. We eat the money together. He chose not to. He walked out. He didn't participate in that grand haste. He walked out. Any other Kenyan would have said, if you're going to get 350 billion for nothing, why not? So he disagreed with Uhuru on that, and they parted ways. When Raila, his great friend, did a handshake with Uhuru, he didn't agree with that handshake with Uhuru, but he recognized Raila's right to have a handshake, and he kept away. When Ruto even came to the NDC of Safina Party, and he told him, I'm not joining a political campaign. You come here just like I invited in every other political party leader and presidential candidates to attend my annual delegates congress. You can attend. Does not mean that now you are enemies, but I'm not supporting you. And when he was blocked from being on the ballot, he kept away from the entire campaign. He didn't campaign for any of the two. Didn't even endorse any of the other candidates who stayed on the ballot. He kept away and he kept quiet. But people take advantage of Jimmy's long silence because he doesn't speak for himself most of the times. He's largely been a media shy person.
Yeah.
So a lot of character people have tried to create an image of Mr. Wanjigi in the way they perceive him without him being asked some of these questions. That is why actually I felt it when somebody called me that this space was going on. And maybe it's time. Yeah. Let me get in.
Well,
If Jimmy is not going to speak for
somebody was
himself.
really what is it called? Somebody was snitching on us. It's good to know.
No, somebody else told me that there's a space going on, your clan is being discussed. I said, okay, fine. He can't speak for himself, I'll appear. And if there be any question, because this is somebody I've been with now for over almost now 10 years plus.
Okay.
And the things that you hear said about him that are meant to divert us from the real issue, because the main thing is the issue that is affecting the country. Can we focus on the issue? Because
Yes.
ultimately, with or without Jimmy Wanjigi,
Yeah.
this problem is here.
Yeah, and that's the point where I want you to come in. First of all, I have one question that's more of a refreshment, and then the question is really the way forward and how we get out of all these problems. So the first question is: you said that he disagreed with Uhuru on the SGR. Probably this information is already out there, but my question at this point is, and just that's a reminder of which role was he playing in this. He did,
In terms of,
when he disagreed with him and was advising, which role was.
because the point is, the SGR project was conceptualized by the Raila and Kibaki government, the Grand Coalition. They are the ones who had conceptualized and done all the feasibility studies. And he was aware of what they were doing. So he was saying, open it up for a PPP, let people tender. And he was looking forward to
As
an
who?
open tender process.
As who?
As a as a Kenyan citizen,
Yeah, but
just
Willis,
like anybody.
me and
Uh,
you don't go advising Uhuru Kenyatta, and
no,
that's the
you know,
point. And that's the
when I
point I was
tell you,
trying
maybe
to put
maybe
out
what,
there.
okay,
Yeah.
if that be the question, that's why I said, it's not like he didn't have access to Uhuru Kenyatta. He had access to him. He had access to Ruto. He had access to Raila. So if it is being discussed as a person who has access to them, you tell them, no, why are you going this route? Take this thing to that what the Kibaki cabinet had passed. Take it through a public PPP process. Let the best consortium that can put up the PPP come in and do it. Why do you want to spend public money on it? And he had already put up a team that, amongst others, that were interested in that venture.
Oh, okay, okay.
So,
Yeah.
so the point is, we should not say that as who, even you, if you had access to Uhuru Kenyatta, you have a right to tell him the path you are going on this particular project is wrong. Why don't you allow be a privately driven venture? So yes, he had access to Uhuru Kenyatta at the time, and he told him, just like anybody else. But Uhuru Kenyatta made the ultimate executive decision on the path. Jimmy couldn't influence that decision. He was not a member of the cabinet that now made the decision or owned the process and said we are going through this. Right now, I'm
So,
talking on this platform.
so you see,
I am
Willis,
also.
if I just
Mm,
interrupt you a little bit, so that is where the problem comes in.
mm,
If you're the problem, if you're the president, and I advise you
mm,
as a friend, I don't have the
mm,
mandate. So even if you are disrespecting is the wrong word, but not taking my advice, then
mm.
it becomes really, I can advise however I want, but it's still will not be done how it was supposed to be done. Had Jimmy had authority, I know he can advise as a friend, then it would be like we need to get away from these relations, and actually have strong institutions whereby we would be discussing the point where a presidency ignored these cabinet or ignored, then we're going to move on. But at this point, that's why I was asking us who, because we should not have a position.
But even now, even your space right now, what you're hosting, this space you're hosting, you are offering advice to the executive. It is. I'm sure even they're on your space listening to you. And if they don't agree with the position that you're proposing, doesn't mean even if you are supporting them or you're not supporting them, doesn't mean that you have authority over them, control over them. You've just aired your view. And the spaces that have been held in this country in the last, let me say, 2 months or so, have been spaces where people are expressing their own individual positions and sentiments on issues of governance. Some of the people who have spoken have previously been members even of Ruto's party. And they are saying the path you're going, we don't agree with it. And if you believe the issue is going to have a greater impact on the quality of life in the country, then you have a right also to, because as a Kenyan, doesn't mean that if there's an executive that you keep quiet and never share your views, they know everything, know it all. No. You have a right to raise an alarm and say, hey, wait a minute, this path you've taken is going to cost the whole country. And Jimmy did that. As any Kenyan will have done. Today, Kenyans are doing it on the space almost every week. I'm seeing spaces everywhere.
Yeah, but they don't have
Yeah.
a mandate. That's the point I was
No, they
going to.
have. That is, oh, no, no. What I am disputing is this. You see, the concept of Kenyans don't have a mandate. Kenyans have a mandate and they have a right and a duty to participate in their governance and to share, express their views on everything the government is doing. What they lack is the capacity or the authority to implement their views. That authority resides in the executive.
That's
So
what I
Jimmy
was
gave
talking
his
about.
views.
That's what I was
Yes.
talking about, the
Okay.
implementation. But I think I'm having the
Implementation rests
yes.
in the executive.
Yeah, so that's my problem that I'm having, because you talk about be advising the executive or they're listening here. I would tell you point blank that even as I sit here, there are people who've reached out to me and want me to work for them. I said no. So yes, I could
Mm-mm.
advise, but when I'm advising, I want to be at the position of advising at as an official, whereby I have the constitution, and we were following some procedure, because otherwise we are running a country like our backyards, and this is not to.
Look, no, look at Article 10 of the Constitution and Article 118 of the Constitution on public participation, and then look at the Court of Appeal decision on the 2023 Finance Bill, where the court actually says the executive is not an absolute. They don't know it all. They must take into account the people's views. They must take into account Marge's views. And if they disagree with Marge, they have a responsibility to note why they've made a decision contrary to what Marge and a majority of the people who presented their views on that issue took. So I seem to disagree when you are moving on the premise that the executive know it all, and the people don't have to speak.
No.
We just have,
That's
so what I'm
that's a
urging you, is that when people
you're
speak on an issue,
misunderstanding me, and I would
okay, I'm sorry
wish
if I
to.
misunderstand you.
I'd wish to
What I'm
correct.
saying,
Can I proceed?
okay,
Thank you. I wish to correct that, So what I'm trying to say, if you were supposed to do something, because there are people who are advised and who, you have to do a public participation. But when it reaches, let's say we're talking about energy, and you have that cabinet, you as Willis should be making those decisions. And you as Willis should be allowed to work according to what the powers should be given to you. Absolutely. So when you're doing
what does it mean to be allowed to work? Because no one stops cabinet meetings.
To be you allowed to really implement what your position allows you to do. We shouldn't have situations whereby Muturi is coming out to say the president does not listen to me and things like that. So what I'm saying is public participation, that is fine, that happens. But now we have a situation whereby there are people in the government who are not able to perform their functions as they're supposed to be because our system as it is does not allow. If it would allow, then we would have actually, because then explain to me why we have all the time the courts are declaring things that have gone through the parliament and the other things unconstitutional. They're working against the constitution day in, day out. If they would, so that's my point. So actually we are talking about the same thing. I think we're just misunderstanding each other.
Maybe.
So the people have a right, the people have the power, and I don't want us to be the only one talking here. I'll just finish,
I was actually worried about that.
And then the people can chime in with questions. So
and
that is the point where I'm saying, planned or not, I find it very problematic when private citizens are really even coming up again, because they're sharing with us, but it seems like it was shaky because that is where I use the word mandate. When you have a CS, for example, or whatever, then you're letting them work the way, they have the constitution in the back. That is what happens in other countries. That's why other countries are really moving forward and we are not moving forward. Because you find mtu atasema, no, huwezi fanya hivyo. So we need really to have institutions that are working. But again, finish because I interrupted you, and then people are going to come in and ask you those questions. Yeah.
What I was going to say is this. Ultimately, it is all about the best interest of the people of Kenya. Anybody holding a public office, it's a public trust. Whatever decision you make, whatever you do, you are doing it for the benefit of the people of Kenya. And the people of Kenya have a right to agree with your decision. They have a right to disagree with your decision. And they can follow the constitution in expressing their like or dislike with the constitution. And Jimmy Wanjigi is a private citizen like any other private citizen in this Kenya, and he has the same rights that anybody else has.